Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us once again on our Wednesday morning class. The pet is mightier than the sword. The mouth is more mightier than the sword. We are going through the book, the Chafetz Chaim book of Master Your Words, Master Your Life. It's part of the Chafetz Chaim Heritage Foundation of books of translating a daily dosage of the Chafetz Chaim's writing on the laws of Lashon Hara and Mechilus. So thank you for joining us. We are on day 90, page 260. Day 90, page 260. So it really, we're starting chapter 10. And as we mentioned before, the chapters are more divided into the growing your idealism, right? Growing your right? The idea of the hashkafa component, the philosophy component of how to make sure we become better people in general, but especially in regarding Lashon Hara and Mechilus, making sure we talk properly. Right. So this chapter is going to deal with the idea of idealism spreading your light. So when think about it for a couple of minutes, or not that long, but if you just think about it, right? Great things that have happened, right, have come from inspiration, right, and they've come through. Sometimes it's just an inspiration, and it comes from people that are go-getters, people that actually work on it, right, and do something about that inspiration. A lot of us have inspiration, and when a spark of inspiration strikes, there are only two choices: fan it into a flame, or let it die out. Right, let it die out. It could happen, right? But then you're not going to have a fire, right? I remember in camp, we went camping, right? And we had we had our teepee of the logs, right? And then, you have the little twigs, right? Because you need the little twigs to catch. And then you have the really small little twigs. So you have the bark of the tree. Actually, the bark of the tree is very flammable, right? Believe it or not, it's excellent for if it's not wet, right? It's excellent to start a fire, right? And you need to get a little spark. So we weren't in the old ages, where they took two stones and they try to make a rock or swivel the thing, like that. We were a little more advanced. We actually had matches. But even that, it starts a little bit, and if you don't fan it, right, if you don't fan the flames, right, then it's going to die out. It's not going to catch onto the twigs by itself. It's not going to, so nowadays instead of it, you pour lighter fuel on it, right? But that dies out if it doesn't catch onto the logs. If you don't fan it, make sure it catches onto the log, then that inspiration, that spark of fire, dies out. And that's what they're saying over here. Right? Some of the greatest leaps in Shmiras Lashon, right, in homes and shul and community across the globe have been ignited by one person's spark. And this is, as I mentioned, we're talking about Shmiras Lashon, but there's a lesson in life in general. Some of the greatest inventions in the secular world, but especially in the spiritual world, right, of different programs, of different classes, of different inspirational events, trips, Shabbatons, different programs that have taken over and we take for granted, right, have come from one person's spark, a spark that he or she fanned, right, fueled by empowered empowered by getting others to board. Ordinary people can inspire extraordinary change. When they do, the benefits live on forever. Sometimes we think, oh, it's the rabbis, it's these people that are in the organizations, these CEOs, these community people. Who am I to come up with an idea? Who am I to? I'm not. Some of the greatest organizations have been inspired. Now these people are, they were regular people like you and me, regular people. There's an organization, and I'm trying. This is Lashon Hara and everything. There's an organization in Eretz Yisrael.
Amen.
There's an organization there. It's called Yad Sarah. I don't know if anybody heard of it. It's an organization in Eretz Yisrael called Yad Sarah, the Hand of Sarah. What's this organization? Organization is started off with lending, different medical supplies, wheelchairs, small crutches, things like that. And now they have buildings across the country. Their headquarters in Jerusalem, a massive building, right? On Rehov Herzl. And they not only do like small, they do many more sophisticated medical supplies. They have also a service that takes people to the hospital. They have now therapies in their building, right? And it's all subsidized, very limited cost or subsidized completely. And it started off with this couple in I think it was actually, I think they were living in Sanhedrin Mechevet, a community in Jerusalem, a very religious community. Apartments are like the size of our living room, our dining room, living room, and kitchen, probably, right? Not the wealthy people, not, and they realized there was a need, so they borrowed from one place, and they lent from one person to another person, and they did research of who had extra things, and they asked, and they created a small little little warehouse, and then a storefront, and then they started, people started hearing about it, so they started fundraising for it, and now it's this massive organization that you speak to any Israeli, they'll know about it, Yad Sarah, right? It's a phenomenal, unbelievable organization. A couple regular people. Right? Same thing with these inspirational. I'm sure some of you might see, and if not, right, people have like these cards on their table, right? Most people have it on their Shabbos table. They have it on a table. It says, "In this table, we don't speak lashon hara," right? It's a little more wordy than that, right? Right? A little. Showing her right now. She has it on her table, right? It's like a hard plastic that sits nice on your table. That was inspired by one person in their home, and then they went and they thought about it, and they went to the Chavetz Chaim Heritage Foundation, and they said, "We love this idea," and they ran with it. But they could have said, "Oh, whatever, it's not for me. People don't listen. I just will do it in my house." And no, we all have what to contribute to society. We all have thoughts. Our ideas are no different than anybody else. And we shouldn't think that just because I'm not in some organization, I'm just another number in Flatbush at Borough Park, or I'm just another out-of-town person that, what do I know, whatever. It just will work for me. I don't know. That's not how it works. We all have a spark. We all have ideas, right? We all have our individuality, right? That how we see things, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. Yes, sometimes they're not a good idea, let's be honest, right? But we all have, and if we don't try to fan the flames, if we don't try to inspire and not do it for fame, God forbid, but just do it because it's a great idea. Let me share with people, right? And nothing's going to happen. And if you think that, let someone else do it, or someone else will come with this idea, or leave it to the professionals. But yes, certain things we do have to leave to the professionals, right? But we have to be involved, we have to be inspired, and we have to fan those flames. So that's what this chapter is gonna bring out, different insights, right? On the other page, right? They're calling it grow your idealism, sorry, right? Yes, that came out wrong, right? But we have to realize that we all have the strength, we all have the ability, right, to do something powerful, and we shouldn't knock ourselves down just because, what do I know? I'm just some small person in an out-of-town community. I'm just another person that lives, another Jew on 13th Avenue in Borough Park, where there's like 5 million Jews, right? We all have to do this, but that's what this chapter is about, and it's a very powerful thing, right? That we have to remember, right? Because so many things that we now assume are like, whoa, and have been started, right, by ordinary people, right? Ordinary people with an idea, right? Beis Yaakov movement started by Shara Schneer, right? She was a seamstress, right? In Krakow, right? And she started it, right? And then people ridiculed her. Well, she went to the rabbis. She didn't give up. She spoke to the Chavetz Chaim, right? The Chavetz Chaim himself she spoke to, and others, and they gave her a blessing. And now there's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of girls, tens of thousands of girls that have Torah education because of her. So never underestimate our abilities, our power, right? And in Shmir Shalashon, but in everything in general. Any questions or comments before we move on? Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so we are dilemma. What's the dilemma? The dilemma is a very interesting dilemma. The dilemma is your friend's daughter has just been turned down for a teaching job in elementary school, right? Where you've worked for many years as a principal's administration assistant. In fact, you were in the interview, right? In fact, you were in on the interview. You know that your friend's daughter wasn't hired because the principal felt she didn't project enough energy to energize a class. Right? A meek little girl, but a good girl, right? Right? But she was like, yeah, so that's powerful to talk, and that's a problem if you're trying to be a teacher, right? You don't have to be rah-rah loud that the whole, social hall hears you, right? But you gotta project yourself. You gotta be out there, right? Now, your neighbor asked you, what she say about your daughter, right? Do you have any idea why she didn't hire? She knows you're in the principal's inner circle and you can't pretend not to know. What should you say? Ba-bam. Okay. What do we all have to say about this? Anybody?
Well, I already read the halacha, so I just.
Okay, but what were your thoughts?
Yeah,
That's along those lines, or
I like that. I mean, really, I wouldn't have told it.
no one read it yet, Bonnie. You're the only one that cheated. I'm just kidding. I mean, you're the only one that. Just joking, Bonnie. We love you. So go ahead. What are your thoughts?
No, I certainly wouldn't have been honest until actually we're on this page right now. I don't think I would have done anything wrong anyway by tweaking the truth, so that it wouldn't hurt the other persons, wouldn't hurt the young ladies. And who the mother was asking? I'm trying to think. Who was asking?
The mother was the mother of
Yeah.
the girl was asking.
Yeah, well, one, when you tell the mother, then she's going to tell the daughter, or maybe not. She won't even tell her. She'll protect her as well. But I think, I would have handled it in a very similar manner.
Okay, Jim, what do you have to say?
Okay.
Talk loud, that everybody cares.
Hello, good morning.
So Jim knows how to project himself. Go ahead.
I'm not a rabbi. I've not had professional training. I disagree with the premise that what if I have to lie to keep the peace? I don't think you have to lie. I think there are ways you can answer the question and not lie. So I would say something like, it's not appropriate for me to discuss any personal things that go on at the school, including interviews. If you want more detail, I would suggest you contact the principal. Mm-hmm. That way you're not lying. You're giving them something to do if they want to really find the truth. And truly, it is not proper for. I'll notice.
I agree with you, but let's add a caveat over here. Let's say this is a good friend, and there's been other people that have got jobs, and they did get jobs. And this good friend, a little gossip, not gossip, but and this
Gossip.
And previous times you did say, this kid interviewed so well or whatever. So now you can't say that. You can't go ahead and say that it's not the policy for me to discuss, because you have discussed in the past.
No, you can't. I think you can.
But then you're contradicting yourself, because you have discussed in the past.
If
I'm changing the case now.
Okay, I discussed what in the past?
Discussed other friends' kids that have.
I discussed other people in the past, and it was improper of me. And so I am going to do not discuss.
You're right, but the person's going to know that you're doing that.
That's right.
Because that means to say that there was something negative said.
Yes, and they will know that I know something, and that I'm not saying it.
But you know something that was negative.
Correct.
Because if it
But
wasn't
I'm
negative,
not-
then you would have said
but
it.
I'm not going to lie. I am not going to lie.
Okay.
And so if I'm not going to lie and I'm not telling her exactly what happened, then I am going to deflect.
Okay. Okay. So that's Jim's opinion. Jim's opinion is that you cannot lie at all.
There's no,
Right.
well, there's not a reason
There's
to.
no reason because you're going to deflect, even though that deflection based on our, we just tweaked the example, right? Is that deflection is still going to imply that something
Yeah.
negative was said. And as we said in the past, that Achilles is even creating animosity, even with not actually saying something. If the person from your words, from your reaction, from your things, understands that that person said something negative about you or about someone they love, right? That is still Achilles, right? But Jim is saying, like we had last week, right? Kibbut Avim overrides the laws. Kibbut Avim does not override the laws of Achilles, right? So over there you weren't allowed. So Jim is saying, not to lie, which is a avera in the Torah. Actually, if I remember correctly, it's in this week's Torah portion. Parshas Kedoshim, right? Not to lie, right? Is an avera in the Torah, right? And that would trump, right, or take over, right? The prohibition of Achilles. That's Jim's opinion. Okay. Anybody else? Any other thoughts?
And it's worth nothing, in my opinion.
No. Everybody's opinion is worth something.
It's worth a quarter.
Actually, we're going to learn about this. I don't remember if we did learn about this, but the Chavetz Chaim says one is not allowed to say lashon hara about himself either. So, one's not allowed to talk negative about themselves either. But continue. Anybody else? Any other thoughts?
Okay, well, I tend to agree with Jim. Actually, in some ways, maybe it was even a little inappropriate for the woman to put whoever it
You're
is
100% correct. It is inappropriate, but she did
on
it.
the spot. And so
You're
there you
right.
are on the spot. And I think I would try to redirect the person involved and say, really, ideally, your daughter should speak with the principal and seek positive feedback that would be helpful.
Right. So, Judy, you're 100% correct. It's inappropriate of the mother to ask her friend. That is correct. But we are talking about the examples we give are real life examples, and therefore people do inappropriate things. Right. So you're saying you're agreeing with Jim that reflect as much as possible, even if that deflection is going to hint to that based off because in the past you haven't deflected, and whatever your friend knows you really well, right? That will still imply that there was a negative reason why she wasn't. It's not negative or positive, but there was a reason why that she wasn't accepted. You're still saying that you should try to deflect. Okay, I hear that. Anybody else?
When I say deflect, I'm saying resolve it, but resolve it by going to the person
Okay,
who made the decision.
right. Anybody else? Go ahead, Emily.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Cindy.
No, I agree with Judy too. If the mother is asking me directly, I would just say, I would suggest you just go straight to the principal to get what her thoughts were, because whatever I tell you isn't going to be exactly what transpired. I don't know what exactly the principal's decision was based on.
But you do. But you do. But you do know. So you're lying.
But I
There
don't.
was a roundtable discussion. Do we accept this person or not? The principal said, and everybody said she was just too meek and she couldn't project herself. And nothing against her. She's a lovely girl, but we don't feel that she'll be able to articulate and really engage the kids. That was what it said. So you know exactly the reason.
It's not my place to say it.
Okay, I'm not saying it is your place, but are you allowed to say what you said? That's lying, right? That you don't know. Or even if, let's say, which you do know, so you are saying a lie, right? Number two is, let's say you say something that's not a lie. You fumfer, you say, listen, I really think you should speak to the principal about this. By saying that your friend knows, and this is where the dilemma is, your friend knows that you know because you're part of the inner circle, right? And by saying that, you are now going to create a little lack of you're going to create a little animosity in between you and your friend and the principal, because they know that it's for a reason. Because if it was for a non-bad reason, whatever, you would have said something, right? Or if you would have said something. Are you allowed to say that? So you're saying that also, like Jim, deflect. Jim, see, a lot of people are following you.
Deflect. But so I wasn't so clear on the story. If I know I was there and I know what the principal said and the reasons why couldn't I tell her? It's what I know was said to me, and she said she didn't have enough energy, and this is, then why wouldn't I be able to tell her?
Right. So let's say the reason is it's a little negative. The girl is meek and she can't project herself.
But
just because something is true, the mother is going to take offense to it, right? If the mother takes offense to it, so therefore it's going to create animosity. Remember, we're talking about Achilles, it's not Lashon Hara. We're not talking about something negative necessarily. We're saying something that will create. Achilles is, are you allowed to tell someone something about someone else's decision or what someone else said or someone else did that will offend and create a fight or an argument or a lack of friendship between people? That is Achilles. So by you saying the reason, right, you are, even though it's a fact, but you are still saying something that is about the girl's daughter that parents don't want to hear, right? Their daughter or whatever, or it's protect herself.
I don't think so. I actually would. What if it could be thought of as positive, critique of something she should be aware of.
So that's the girl should go ahead and find out herself what the reason is. And yes, and the principal should tell the girl, this is the reason why, and you should work on it. And if you work on it in 2 years, we'll get back to you. That's true. But there's no reason for the mother, I don't care how close the mother is to the daughter, the mother's still going to get hurt by it. It's not the positive critique to tell a mother to her child. We're not talking about a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old, even a 15-year-old. We're talking about someone that's going out for a job. So they're in their 20s, right? Or 19, right? So they have to deal with things by themselves. And by you telling the mother something like that, as strong as the mother is, and as mother's still gonna be hurt by it, right?
I don't think it's that negative. Maybe you're just
negative is subject negative in the laws of Achilles, right? And this is very important. Thank you for bringing this. In the laws of Achilles, if you remember, right? Last case, the question was: is a son allowed to tell the father that the son wants to do his own seder with his kids? The father is going to take offense to it. Was the father right? No. Right? We talked about this. We expanded on parenting a little bit. Father was wrong about that, but still, it is something that is common for a father, right, or a mother sometimes, if you know your parents, right, to take offense to that, right, and that's wrong, right, for them to take offense to that, right, but sometimes that happens, right. So the in situation like that, when we know that's going to happen, there's still the laws of Achilles, right? That is the laws of Achilles. The laws of Achilles is when you're going to say something, right or wrong, if it's right for that person to feel that way or not, doesn't make a difference, right? By that person being hurt by what you're saying, that is Achilles. Achilles is not if you're saying something that's bad or something that's good or something that's false or something that's right? That's true. Achilles is by you saying something to someone about something that they said to either someone they love, right, or someone that they respect, or about themselves, right, that they will be offended. And parents, good, healthy parents, do get offended a little bit or hurt, not offended, but hurt when they hear negative things about their parents. Negative doesn't mean to say it's bad, right? But they feel a little. Now, if you know your friend really well and you know your friend's not going to feel about this, let's say your friend knows this already, you've had this discussion in the past about her daughter, right? So then, of course, there's no question over here, right? You know your friend, she's not going to get hurt. She's already mentioned many times, right? I wish my daughter's a little more outgoing. This is really going to whatever, and you know that, right? So then you know that this is not going to come back and it's not going to be, right? But in a Achilles is it's not based on how the person is going to receive it. And if you don't know how the person is going to receive it, and it's something that is possible, and something that is likely, that it is a common thing that this something like this person, either about themselves or about their kid, right, or about their job or whatever it is, that will get hurt, right? That's Achilles. That's the laws of Achilles, right? And it's very important. I'm glad you guys brought this out. It's very important to to bring this point out, just like the case we had last week about the father wanting to know about the Seder, right? And we said that the son is not allowed to, kibbud av v'em does not trump the laws of Achilles. And that would be considered Achilles because he knows the father is going to be offended. He's going to go and talk to the kid and have it, and might create a fight. And it's stupid. We said, come on, father, your kid is already an adult. He has kids, that don't allow. Spoke about that. That still doesn't take away from the laws of Achilles. So the question over here is the scenario we have. Yes, if the scenario is slightly different, then it won't. And Cindy, I'll let you continue 1 second. And the scenario we have is where this is a situation. If it's this word, if it's this comment, or it's something else that is not necessarily negative about, it's a fact about the person. Just because it's a fact about the person doesn't mean to say the person won't get offended, right? Someone has a kid that has HDHD, or someone has a kid that has. Just because that's a fact, it doesn't mean to say that if people talk about it just for no reason, or they say, oh, people still get hurt by people. That's just the way it is. Doesn't mean to say that you have the right now, unless it's for a toilet, unless it's a therapist, unless there's a good reason, and it's spoken about in a way that the parent understands that there's a reason why, right? You don't just say something just because that's the truth, right? Sensitivity of people's feelings, the Torah goes extremely, it's very sensitive about it. And that is where the laws of Achilles come from. The laws of Achilles is to make sure that we are aware of the sensitivity of people's feelings and not to create animosity in between two people because of the sensitivity of people's feelings. That is the law. That is the backbone behind the laws of Achilles. And if this is something that's going to make the mother, she might know in the back of her head that it's true, right? She doesn't like, it's something that bothers her, something that, she doesn't joke about it. It's not like, it's something that bothers her. Is it right for it to bother her? No, that's how your daughter is, right? It's beautiful. There's so many good things that could come out of it, right? Not being the rah-rah. She probably never get in trouble in school, right? Or other things. But this is something that bothers the mother. Mother wants her daughter to be more out, whatever it is. So you have to know, and we're talking about a case where it does bother, right? Are you allowed to go ahead and say that? Number one. Number two, we are assuming that you're not allowed to. That's the question. The base of the question is that you're not allowed to. And the question is, what could you say, right? And the real question is, and we're going to see from the answer is, are you allowed to even do a little white lie, right? To make sure that the thing is not, doesn't come out to be Achilles because of your lack of answer. Sometimes that's the biggest answer. People think that if you don't answer anything, right, that's not an answer. Pleading the fifth is not always good for someone on stand, because by pleading the fifth, the juries a lot of times think that the person's guilty, right, because they're pleading the fifth. So by a lot of times not answering or deflecting in a way that the person knows that you're not answering, right, because they know you're a friend, whatever it is. If it's a regular stranger, whatever it is, someone comes up to your shop and you've never met each other a couple of times, you don't really have a relationship. So then you could say, this is, it's not appropriate. It's not what we talk about, whatever it is, right? But if it's someone that knows you, by you deflecting it, that non-answer, that deflection is the biggest answer in the world. That's something negative. And then the brain goes on overdrive. So what was it? What was so bad that they said that my friend didn't want me to answer, right? It goes on overdrive, right? And they're going to try to figure it out. And they're good. Like, what they say already? Like, it was so bad. Like, what they didn't like the way, whatever. So brain goes on overdrive and then makes up things, right? And it creates even a greater animosity in between these two people, right? So that is the background on a deeper level. And thank you guys for bringing this out, right? Of the sensitivity that we see from the laws of Achilles and really understanding what the laws of Achilles is, right? And what really behind what's going on over here. Cindy, I think you wanted to continue to say something.
Well, you said a lot since I said raise my hand, but basically, it's obvious in this situation that whatever is going to be said is going to be negative. Because if all was good, she would have been hired, right? So I'm assuming, because I didn't read the answer, that what is going to be the answer is that you have to say something, like you said, a little white lie, so that you don't hurt her feelings. That doesn't resonate with me because I'm honest and I will always want to tell the truth. But that's what I'm thinking is what you're leaning towards. As opposed to hurting someone, we should smooth it over with a little lie.
Okay,
That's what I think.
you're right, and I feel you. I feel you regarding being honest. I try to be an honest person too, but let's expand on that in just a minute. Let's see if anybody else has anything to say, and then we'll expand on that. Any other thoughts? Emily.
Can I talk? So I actually disagree with you, Rabbi. I think that I actually agree more with Jim. I think that I would, if telling the mom, so number one, I think if actually telling the mom would have any would be helpful at all in any way possible. Like if she was able to help the child, whatever it is, then I would probably just tell the mom. If there was no point in telling the mom because she's just going to get upset and she's going to be offended and whatever it is, be angry at the principal, then I would just say, I'm sorry, I can't discuss what was talked about in these meetings. That's not appropriate. I wouldn't.
But the mom knows that you.
One second. I wouldn't lie because it sounds like this girl is in the wrong field. And if you say the reason that she wasn't hired is because she wasn't experienced enough, then she's going to go to another school and get rejected from another teaching job. And it's not helping anyone. So I think actually saying a lie to protect the mother is a bad idea because it sounds like this person does not understand that they're in the wrong field. So I would either say I can't discuss it, or I would actually tell the mother if there was something productive that could come from it. Like if she could help the daughter in some way. But if she's just going to get upset and the kid, I wouldn't say anything because it's really just by telling a lie, you're only making the situation continue. That's what.
Okay, Jim's all excited. Jim just made a look.
Emily,
I'm
100%.
Okay, I'm gonna close shop. It was a pleasure knowing everyone. God forbid.
I agree with
You agree also? Okay, great. So that's beautiful. What?
Spiral. Sending her in a spiral by not.
Okay, so let's
vote. Let's vote.
Let's vote. Right. Let's talk about all these. Let's talk about these points. Right. Let's talk about all these points. Number one, I love this. For those that weren't able to make it Monday night to our speaker, right? This is exactly what we spoke about: having a healthy discussion and talking things over. And Tov Shnaim and Echad, two are better than one because they're like sharpen each other. FYI, we did record it and it's on the Eitz Chaim YouTube channel. I posted the link on the Eitz Chaim WhatsApp group. So please feel free to go ahead and listen to it. But that being said, right, let's talk about a couple of points. Right, number one, right, before we actually get to the halacha, right, because it is very important and the idea of the halacha is extremely important, right? As I keep on saying, there are many scenarios, right, and there are many different. And every scenario, right, is extremely important to remember that the slightest detail, right, would make a difference in halacha. And therefore, as I made introductions in the past, right, and made sure that we constantly remind ourselves, we're bringing out the case to I don't want to use the word extreme, but we're bringing it out to a scenario where all the details are fitting in to that we're trying to bring out a point, right? If the point is slightly different, where the mother is very involved in her daughter and coaches her and helps her out that way, right? So then there might be toelis in this, right? If if the mother doesn't really, and whatever, if the mother doesn't care, if you've talked to the mother, right? The mother, you don't really know the mother, and therefore you could say that it's not appropriate. So then that's great, right? We're talking about a scenario over here where the mother knows that you've talked about other cases, right? Is it right or wrong? Wrong, right? But whatever it is, you've talked about to her, right, about other cases. So you can go ahead and say, right, that it's not appropriate to talk about this. And, no, you can't, because that's straight out lie, right? And the mother's going to know you're doing two averos, right? You're lying because you've talked about this. You're a hypocrite, right? Because you've talked about it. And the mother through that is going to know that by saying that something bad happened, and therefore you're going to create the biggest animosity, and you cannot say that, right? If you have talked to the person, I'm saying this straight out, you could disagree with me, but the halacha is, if you are, and that's not ethical either, if you have talked to this person in the past about other people, or about her other children, or about just we had this interview, you don't mention names, right? But you talked about other things, right, that have happened, because that's just your friendship and you think is it right or wrong? It's probably wrong. It's not, for there's certain be some privacy, but you have talked about other people. You cannot go ahead now and say it is the policy that I can go ahead and discuss. You cannot go ahead and say that, because you've done that, right? And that's 100% wrong. Right? You are lying, you're a hypocrite, right? And through saying that, you're going to create the mother to have the greatest and biggest, right, imagination of how bad it went, right? And how negative it was, that you're going to create the biggest animosity out there. You cannot say that, right? You cannot. Make sure you don't speak about other people beforehand if you want to be able to use that excuse.
If you're sitting in an interview process, sorry, I'm just interrupting for 1 second. If you're sitting in an interview process, I am guessing what happens in that room is supposed to stay in that room.
100%.
You had a big mouth, and last time you blabbed, so you could say, you know what? Last time I blabbed, or last time I spoke about it, I realized that was not appropriate, and this time I've learned.
It's all very nice that you say. It's all very nice that you say that. It's all very nice that you say that. But reality is, right? That's all very nice on paper. But the reality is, if someone tells you that, right? Think about if someone tells you that, right? You're now in the situation. All of a sudden, you're getting on your high horse of your idealism and saying that you can't say something when it has to do with my child. You know what kind of animosity that's going to create? All of a sudden, you're saying
It's
that
not going to create any more than you're going to have anyway.
No, it's not true, because
you're going to lie, and the person's going to get rejected from seven more times.
No. So there's two things. We're talking about the individual, and we're talking about the parent. We're talking about the parent right now. You want to go and help that person, that kid? Go ahead and talk to the kid. Go ahead and talk to the kid. If it's your neighbor, you probably know them. Go ahead and talk to the kid. Don't go through the mother. Don't go through a third party. Right? Go and talk to the kid. You really want to help this kid out? Sit them down and say, hey, listen, you're a great kid. You're wonderful. I just want to give you some advice. Right? I want to give you some advice. Talk to the kid. Why are you going through the mother? Since the mother's your friend? Talk to the kid. You really want to help the person out? We're not talking about a 15-year-old. We're not talking about 13, even 15-year-olds. Right? But okay, it's different. We're talking about an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, or even older. Talk to the person that's been interviewed. You really want to help the person out? Talk to them. That's who you're supposed to talk to.
Or recommend that maybe they see. I don't know if I wouldn't give advice like that. I wouldn't do that.
However way you want to do it, but if you want to help the kid, right, go directly to the kid. Now, about this topic, which is, I think, the underlying behind a lot of the feelings that are going on here, which is a good thing, because lying is a bad thing. We're always taught lying is a bad thing. Midvar shekatercha. I stay far away from lying, right? But we find, right, many times we do, right? Leman hashalom, the Talmud tells us, right? In order for peace, sometimes you're allowed to alter the truth a little bit. We find this in the Torah straight out, right? We find it that when by the Avram and Sarah, right? When the angels came and told the Sarah and Avram that they were going to have a baby, and Sarah was 99, and Avram was 99 years old, right? And what did Sarah said? Right? Am I going to have a baby and my husband is old? Now he was old, and he knew that he was old, right? He was 99 years old, right? Beautiful life. What does the Torah go ahead and say? When God tells Abraham and says, Lama, why did Sarah laugh? Right? What did he altered it a little bit? It said, and she said that I am old. Straight out. God altered the truth. And it's clearly in the Torah. Right? God altered the truth. And what is right and wrong is not necessarily, we've spoken many times, not what our feelings are. It's right and wrong is what the Torah dictates to us is right and wrong, right? And the Torah clearly states that God altered the truth a little bit, right? And Rashi right there in this quotes the Talmud, quotes the oral law, right? Or the oral Torah telling us, why was this done? Because Hashem didn't want there to be a slight fight or a little hard feeling in between Sarah and Avram, because if you said he's old, right? Yes, he's old. He knows he's old, but no guy, right, or no girl likes people pointing out that they're old, right? I'm old and you're not old. What? We can't have a baby because I'm old, right? And it could create even Avram and Sarah, right? Could create the smallest level of animosity. And therefore, says the Torah, right, that God changes just a little bit, right? Didn't lie completely, right, but changes just a little bit, saying that I am old. And there's laws about this, right? It's brought down in the Code of Jewish Law. And it's not just a blanket statement, right? But there are laws. And we find other scenarios also that for preventing, right, animosity, that people to dislike each other, people to get angry at each other, people to create fights amongst each other, right? There are laws of where, yes, you're allowed to alter the truth a little bit. You're allowed to alter the truth a little bit. So we gave one time a whole lunch and learn, right? What is true truth, right? Truth, MS, is not necessarily what Webster's dictionary or any other dictionary translates as truth. Yaakov is known as Ish Emes, the man of truth. That is one of the attributes of Yaakov. The Torah gives a testimony about Yaakov that he's known as Ish Emes, the man of truth. Yaakov is the one that tricked his father. Yaakov tricked his father. Now, we're not going to give a whole class on truth right now. It's an important class. We did lunch and learn on this, I think twice actually, in the past 9 years, right? But what is true truth? MS is MS Vyatziv, right? MS is a concept of getting to the ultimate purpose of unity amongst people, right? And part of the truth is to create, because if you lie, that's creating a friction amongst people, right? But MS, right, is an idea that God created the world with MS, right? The concept of the ultimate, to get to the greatest purpose, right? To the greatest truth of a unity in the world, a world of property. And I don't want to get into a whole class about this. I really don't want to get too sidetracked about this. Right now, I'm bringing the proof, right? We could talk about the idea in another class. But we see, right, that there are times, and the Talmud gives other examples where, where one is allowed to alter the truth just a little bit, right, in order to keep the peace. So when we say that we want to be true people, yes, but we also have to realize that there's laws. The same way we want to honor our parents, right? That we understand. We want to honor our parents. It's a mitzvah, honoring your parents. It's in the 10 Commandments, honoring one's parents. But when it conflicts with Rechilas, just like any other negative commandment, but Rechilas, which Rechilas is keeping the peace amongst people, the Torah tells us that you're not allowed to honor your parents. You're not allowed to honor your parents. The Torah is telling us over here, and again, if there's ways of getting around it, 100%, it shouldn't be your go-to, right? And as I said, every scenario is different. If it's something that you haven't mentioned anything about, you've never talked about before, and the only reason why your neighbor's asking now is because it was her daughter, so then yes, for sure, go ahead and say it's a policy and that we don't do it. 100%, that's great. And you don't know, you never talked about it before. You never mentioned any other recruits or anything like that. 100%. Right? If it was something that that you want to help the girl out, right? So then you tell the parent, this was they decided to go with someone more experienced, whatever it is, right? But then you go ahead and talk to the kid. 100%. You'll have to help if you have that relationship and talk to the kid. Go ahead and talk to the kid, right? But if it's something in a scenario where you can't, right, and you don't have those things, and every scenario is as I mentioned, is different. The point we're bringing out over here is that yes, sometimes to avoid fights, to avoid animosity, right? Yes, you have to alter the truth just a little bit, right? You have to alter the truth just a little bit. It is important. it is extremely important. The Torah tells us straight out, right, that shalom, right, peace amongst people, right, is the ultimate purpose, one of the greatest purposes that we have. Right? Doesn't mean to say that you have to. That doesn't mean to say that you have to bend on your ideals, right? Just because you want to have peace amongst people doesn't mean to say that I have to change what I believe. The other person to respect me, but I will avoid certain conversations, right? I will, certain ways of saying things, but of course I still have to believe what I believe. But regarding a scenario where you're saying something about someone because I have to be a true person, right? The Torah tells you that's not where you have to be true right now, right? Give a little white lie if you're able to, right? If that works, right? Just for example, we're all okay with it. Let's say there's no policy. There's no policy. There's no policy, right? Just the person, you've never talked about this person before, right? You know, other people have talked about, interviews and things like that. There's no policy. Is it wrong not to have that policy? 100%. There's no policy, but you're allowed to say there's a policy, even though there's no policy. It's the right thing, but there's no policy. That's lying a little bit. That's a white lie. There is no policy, but that we're good with, right? Because we don't look at that as a lie. That is a lie. In the laws of Sheker, right? When you alter the truth even a little bit, that is a lie. Well, we've become accustomed to that. Even though there is no policy, we're allowed to say there's a policy in order to avoid the person haggling you, saying, I don't think it's the right thing to say. Well, over here it is the right thing because my daughter, so you're allowed to say there's a policy and I can't go against the policy. Again, if you haven't spoken to this person in the past, because then you're just contradicting yourself and you're a rotten person, right? But if you haven't, right? If you haven't, right? So then you're allowed to say there's a policy. Even though there's no policy, you're lying. That we understand. That we know, that we say, right? And we don't, if you really think about our words, right? Many, many times we already insert and we say certain things, right? That are automatic, has been accepted. It's not really lying, right? Have been accepted to avoid conflict and to avoid things, right? We alter things slightly, right? Many times, right? To avoid conflict. That is, in all technical purposes, if you really get into it, you're lying. We don't look at it as lying.
Can I just say one thing?
Well, let me just finish and then you can, right? So too, the Torah tells us, right? The Torah is telling us that one of those things is, and again, you should ask a shaila beforehand, right? Because every scenario is different, right? But the Torah is telling us that for peace, to keep the peace between people, right? There are times when you're allowed to alter the truth a little bit. That's what the Torah is telling us. And it's something we have to rewire our thinking a little bit, right? Because we have to be wired by the Torah thought, right? What the Torah tells us. We have to rewire our thinking a little bit of what is considered, what is, how far do we go with our truth? How far do we go with hurting people, right? And to see what is considered really lying and what's not really lying. The Torah tells us is not lying, then it's not lying. The Torah tells you that something is kosher, it's kosher. Some Torah tells you something's not kosher, it's not kosher. It's the same thing when the Torah tells you midvar sheker techa, wants to stay far away from lying. There's laws of what is considered lying and what's not considered lying. Go ahead, Emily.
So I think that I understand the concept and I get that lying is it's not pig, like it's never allowed, like it's allowed in certain scenarios and it's appropriate in certain scenarios. I think the example of Abraham and Sarah and Hashem doesn't always fit because there's nothing harmful coming out of Hashem changing the wording there. Like there's no next scenario. Whereas I think in this case, like, I'm not going to argue that you're right halachically on this scenario. I'm going to like let it go and you win and you're the rabbi. But I do think that example of what you said with Hashem, so what? Like God makes it to there's shalom between a married couple and that's great. And we always want shalom between a married couple and that's important. There's no like Sarah's going to go talk to someone out. Like here, this girl, like this girl's going to get rejected for the next school
So
also.
go ahead and talk to the girl. So go ahead and talk to the girl. I'm not saying not to talk to the girl.
Okay, but I'm just saying the example with Sarah Imenu.
No, it's the mother.
Abraham Avinu is great because there's nothing negative coming out of that. It's only going to create shalom
There
bayit.
shouldn't be anything negative coming out of this either, because if you really feel that the girl is gonna keep on going, so then go ahead and talk to the girl.
So let's say so the girl goes and she interviews in the next school, okay? And she gets rejected. And then the mother comes to you and says, I don't understand. I don't know why my daughter got rejected from 2 more schools. And then you're going to lie again, be like, there must be more experienced candidates. You're going to keep saying.
No, it's not. What you should say is, if it's a.
Or you say like maybe.
What you should say is go talk to the school, to that school. See, find out what because now you're not part of that school. So go ahead and say that. But what you could do is you could go ahead and talk to the girl and say, listen, I don't want to tell your mother. It's not my place to tell your mother. But, for you, I want to give you some advice, right? I want to give you some advice.
So it could be.
Talk to the girl. It's for the girl. And the girl's going to take it a lot better than the mother would, because mothers get a lot more emotional about their kids, right, than people about themselves.
I think it depends on the person. I don't think that's.
And that's what I said. I said every scenario is different, and I gave that introduction. You have to know if you're your friend, and you know that your friend is very involved in their daughter, and you know that she knows this, and you know that she's not going to take offense. You know her, right? You know your friend, right? So then there's every scenario is different. We're talking about feelings of people, and that's what I said. Every scenario.
Right, if the mother is just going to get offended by anything you say negative about her daughter, then it makes sense. Like, fine.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. Of course, it depends on the scenario. And that's what I'm saying. That's why one has to, every slight detail, right? These are trying to bring out the point. The point is, the halacha is that if the person's going to get offended, right, you are allowed to slightly change the truth. Now, if the scenario is where the person's not going to get offended, you know the person, right? You know the repercussions are not going to be the way, other people might take it. The scenario, there's various other ways of taking it because of the situation, right? You never talk to the person about things, right? Again, we're creating a scenario in order to bring out the halacha, right? This scenario happens to be that there's various. It could be it really depends on the person. It depends on the relationship with the mother and the daughter. It depends on your relationship. It depends on how well you know. It depends on how emotional this person is. Right? It depends on a million different things. Right? We're trying to bring out a point of halacha. Right? If there's other details that will change it, 100%. One should not lie. Right? One should be able to find those details. Right? 100%. Right? But what I'm trying to bring out is, yes, we are creating the scenario. We are the authors of this case, right? And we are creating a case where there will be hard feelings, right? You could talk to the daughter if you want to take care of that point. And if it goes to another school, then you could easily say, speak to that school and deflect it that way because you're not involved in that school, right? And there'll be no hard feelings, right? But one has to be very careful. The point of this halakha is we see how far, right? We see how far the Torah goes, right? We see how far the Torah goes regarding being sensitive about other people's feelings. It's mind-boggling, right? The Torah is telling us being sensitive to other people's feelings. The Torah is good. We brought other scenarios, right? Okay, mitzvah kibbud av v'em. That's a positive commandment. I don't have to. The Torah is telling us that one is allowed to alter the truth a little bit of what we call truth, right? Because ultimately that's emes, right? Because if the Torah tells us that's okay, that's emes. It's not, we have a dispensation to lie, right? The Torah is telling us that's all part of what included in emes, and that's a very powerful class that we rehash of what is true emes, right? But the Torah is telling us that people's feelings, and true people's feelings, right, is so important that sometimes you're allowed to alter the truth a little bit. Sometimes you're allowed to alter the truth. You're allowed to avoid saying certain. When I know what I'm talking about certain people, I avoid certain topics. I know they're going to get hurt. Okay, over here I'm avoiding. Even though I'm a rabbi, and sometimes even if they make a comment, I would try to change the conversation, not to talk about that. Right? Even though by me not responding, they make assumptions one way or another. Right? But I know that this is create a fight. I know this topic is going to create a fight, and therefore, even though it's my job to educate, right? I change the conversation, right? A go-to is always how bad the Jaguars are doing, right? Okay, right? Hopefully they'll do better this year, right? Right? But you have to be really sensitive about other people's feelings. We have to, the Torah is telling us, and it's so powerful, the lesson of this halacha, right, is showing us how careful we have to be about other people's feelings, right? And that's the point of this halacha, right? If there's the case changes just a little bit, right? There's a slight variation here, a slight variation there, which will change change it 100%. The halacha is totally different, right? You know your friend, she's not going to be sensitive. She's been looking out. She's trying to help her daughter, right? First time she took this job, she thought maybe yes, maybe not, right? So you say, hey, I don't think teaching will be a good, good job for her, and maybe find something else because, she doesn't really have that personality. And you can say it in a nice way. You don't have to say she's meek and she's quiet, right? You say it in a nice way, right? Let's maybe try to find her a different, a different kind of career, right? There's ways of saying it, of course, right? But in a scenario where the mother's going to be offended, she thinks her daughter is the best teacher and the best thing, right? The mother's going to take offense, right? You should go talk to the daughter if you're able to, right? And say, hey, listen, it's FYI, right? Just to prevent you from having hardship in the future, I think you should look for another thing. Let me explain to you. Teaching, you have to have a, really outgoing personality, and you're a beautiful girl and you're a great girl, but no, let's be honest, that's not one of your strengths, right? And you can say it in a nice way that the daughter will understand because you're talking to her and won't have the emotions of the mother looking out because she wants her daughter to put her daughter on a pedestal, right? That's what parents do sometimes, all right? So there's ways of avoiding other things, of 100%. As I said, every scenario, every small little detail makes a tremendous difference, right? But the point of this halacha, right? Putting away all those things aside, if we're in a case where we don't have another way out, then you're allowed to alter the truth slightly. How far? There's laws about it. And we're not going into that right now, but there are slight variations of one's allowed to do, right, in order to keep the peace. You're not allowed to make up things, right? You're allowed to lie slightly to keep the peace. And that just shows two things. Number one, MS, truth, is not what Webster's dictionary says. Truth is what the Torah tells us is truth. Just like the Torah tells us milk and meat is prohibited, so too truth, and as every other ethical thing, is what the Torah tells us. Number two, we see how far the Torah goes in order to make sure that we are sensitive to other people's feelings. And I think that is the biggest takeaway from the class. How much we have to be sensitive about other people's feelings, right? And reflect and reanalyze our actions and the way we do things and the way we act and talk, right? And post to make sure that we are sensitive to other people's feelings.
Bye-bye.
I'm gonna give me one time. I'm just gonna turn off the recording and then we could continue this conversation, right? Thank you everybody for joining us. It was a great class, and we're gonna